Materials and availability of the materials, the cost of the materials is something else that we dealt with in the beginning. We had a lot of difficulty finding the materials, but through a lot of other schools sharing with us, giving ideas, pointing us in the right direction of where we could get materials, we were able to build our classroom libraries, build the teacher library for curriculum, and many of the curriculum publishers had Spanish available and continued to update that. We had math in Spanish, we had social studies in Spanish, and our reading program was built primarily on our classroom libraries rather than a set book, an anthology that had so many stories. So it was much easier to find texts that we could use for the classroom. Science, I don't know if I mentioned that, is also, we found available in Spanish. At least the student books were in, and take-home kind of papers were in Spanish. The teacher guide was in English. So you had to, work with that. And the cost was something else. Our first year we were basically working on the regular budget from the district, in Rockford anyway. The second year in Rockford, our principal was able to get a grant combined with the high school program that was starting Chinese, a federal grant that gave us monies for 3 years, which was a tremendous help in being able to initially pay for paraprofessionals, curriculum, and other materials that you need in the classroom. One of the other things that was in this big learning curve was finding the teachers who were both fluent in the language and certified in elementary education. Too many times we found teachers who were certified in high school but not certified for their high school language, Spanish or Chinese, but not for elementary education. Or you found elementary education with some Spanish but not enough to be able to manage a class all day long in that target language. Screening for both teachers and students was a learning curve, how to ask the questions, what kinds of questions to ask, and we primarily did those always in Spanish with a few parts beginning in English. And then training, the availability of training for immersion education was very scarce when we first started these programs, although they had been going on in Canada and other places for many, many years before it hit the U.S. One of the things that we did at Rockford was initially sent for the first 3 years, I think it was, new teachers to the University of Minnesota, which is, in my opinion, like the go-to university for immersion education. And after that, it was kind of left to the district to continue to train new teachers as they came in. One of the issues that we also dealt with was being accepted in the district. In the case of Grand Rapids, they merged two schools. One was a private Spanish, or maybe it was a charter, I'm not sure, Spanish program, all Spanish, and one that was an all English program, and merged them into the one program, one school, all in the same year. So we had kids from pre-kindergarten through 8th grade. It was a K-8 program, pre-K-8. And all of a sudden, English kids were in classes for Spanish, and Spanish kids were in classes with kids who spoke English primarily. It was very challenging those first few years, and also then finding teachers to step in right away for all of those grades. One of the other things that is that we saw when I entered my first was the creating of teams. And again, because you have a much more limited group of candidates to choose from, sometimes that team building and team creation is a little more challenging. So I encourage those of you who might be interested in immersion education to get as much time in a classroom ahead of time where you can build some relationships before you start out on that interview process. Some schools have more of a challenge with administrative buy-in. Often it comes from a grassroots, from parents or from other teachers, the decision or the idea to go to an immersion program. We had a marvelous administrator for our school, principal, who was totally gung-ho about it and ready to jump in. He had had experience in 2 other countries teaching ESL, so understood the value of being bilingual and studying in this way. So we were very excited about that. Sometimes others in the administration were on a higher learning curve, sharper learning curve, to understand the reasons, not for the purpose of the program, but of a lot of the details that were needed to make the program successful. My other experience was pretty early after Rockford School started, there were 4 districts: Rockford, Forest Hills, Zeeland Christian, and I'm trying to think maybe it was just the 3 initially. And we decided we really should be able to learn from each other and build each other up and share ideas, lesson plans, curriculum, resources. So we formed the West Michigan Alliance of Immersion Educators. At the helm of that at the time was a principal from Forest Hills, and we all collaborated, shared, rotated from school district to school district. Twice a year we met and shared resources, had speakers come in, until about 7 years ago now we decided that we were getting bigger and wanted to be able to do more for our teachers, so we formed as a nonprofit organization and now have a board. And I served on that board as the president for the first 5 years, helping to lead the West Michigan Alliance of Immersion Educators, or what we often call WAME, into more professional and more diverse opportunities of learning from special speakers, people who have been there before us, and what they could share with us. I've also worked at the Michigan Department of Education, working on the seal of biliteracy. It was something that many other states did before it came to Michigan, and we had been trying to talk to the state of Michigan to see about getting that for Michigan. And then now that I'm on the committee, I found out that that same question was coming from other groups, probably about the same time as we were asking it. So now I'm just excited to be a part of that committee as we continue to flesh out all the requirements and materials that they can get, helps, and all of that is on the West Michigan Department of Education webpage now. Some of the struggles is the next question of the immersion program. Often that depends on where you come into the program. If you're starting like I did, all 3 places their first year, the learning curve is very high and stress can get very high. We set high standards and then are frustrated when we don't reach those. So it takes a really good administrator to be able to help each of the teachers work through those, support them, and getting on to the next level. So some of the things in particular, in the first school that I worked, the first 2 schools, both the one in Venezuela and the one at Southwest Community Campus in Grand Rapids, it was totally dedicated, that school, to the immersion program. So everybody in there was involved in it. The 3rd school I worked at was a split school where you had the traditional English program and then the Spanish immersion, and we were like half and half of the whole population of the school. It was half of each program. And initially it was very difficult, I felt, for the traditional teachers, and we found out some years later that it was partly due to lack of communication about what our program was going to be like. Some of the teachers who were specials, especially the specials teachers like art, music, PE, were afraid they were going to lose their jobs, that they would be replaced by bilingual teachers, things like that. And because there was so much energy put into making this Spanish immersion program work and fly and get everything that it needed, unfortunately the traditional teachers were sort of left behind in the dust informationally. They were always continuing with their regular curriculum they had. It did not change them in that way. So there came some misunderstandings within the building. I felt like we did a really good job of informing parents, but had probably left that part out with the other teachers. Oftentimes, there are unprepared administrators. Somebody might be very excited about the program, but have no experience